The call came at 2:15 p.m. on a Tuesday while I was reviewing blueprints for a shopping center renovation in downtown Portland. 26 contractors submitting bids, each one trying to undercut the others while maintaining quality standards that would satisfy my reputation as one of the Pacific Northwest's most demanding project managers. "Samantha, we need to talk." Mom's voice had that tone I remembered from childhood, the one that meant a decision had been made and discussion wasn't welcome. "Hi, Mom. What's going on?" "Your father and I have decided to renovate the house. Complete overhaul, new floors, updated kitchen, the works. You need to pack your stuff and find somewhere else to stay." I set down my coffee and gave her my full attention. "When?" "This weekend. The contractors start Monday." "Mom, that's 4 days' notice. It's plenty of time to pack a few boxes. You don't have that much stuff anyway." That stung more than it should have. At 28, I'd been living in my childhood bedroom for the past 6 months, ostensibly to help with Dad's recovery from his knee surgery. In reality, I'd been there much longer. Almost 2 years since I'd moved back from San Francisco to help manage their finances during Dad's early retirement. Where am I supposed to go? "I'm sure you'll figure something out. Maybe that little apartment complex on Maple Street. They have month-to-month rentals." The dismissal in her voice was clear. "Pack your stuff, find a cheap apartment, stop being a burden on your successful parents." "How long will the renovation take?" 6 months, maybe 8. Depends on how extensive we decide to go." "And after that?" "After that, your father and I will have our house back. Empty nest like we planned." I closed my eyes. "Mom, I've been helping with Dad's physical therapy, managing your investments, handling the property taxes dash. And we appreciate that, honey. But it's time for you to build your own life instead of managing ours." The conversation continued for another few minutes, but the message was clear. They wanted me gone. Permanently. "I understand," I said finally. "I'll pack." "Good. I knew you'd be reasonable about this." After she hung up, I sat in my office overlooking the Columbia River thinking about reasonable. My parents thought I was a nearly 30 failure living in their basement, contributing nothing to the household while I figured out my life direction. They had no idea that the little consulting work I did from home was actually Davis Construction Management, a company that had generated $12 million in revenue last year. They didn't know that I owned the apartment complex on Maple Street they'd suggested. Or the office building where Dad's dentist practiced. Or the shopping center where Mom bought her groceries every Thursday. They thought I was broke because I drove a 10-year-old Honda and wore jeans to family dinners. Because I'd never moved out of my childhood bedroom, never brought home expensive boyfriends, never flashed money or talked about my business success. I'd let them think I was struggling because it was easier than explaining why a successful construction executive was still single, still living at home, still driving an old car. Because every time I tried to talk about my work, they'd change the subject to ask when I was going to find a real job, or get married like my older sister Jennifer. My phone rang. Bill Morrison, my lead foreman. "Sam, the Davis house renovation, you want us to start demo this weekend like planned?" I'd forgotten. 3 weeks ago, I'd hired Morrison Construction to completely renovate my parents' house. New hardwood floors, updated kitchen, master bathroom addition, finished basement. A $200,000 project that I'd planned to surprise them with for their 30th anniversary next month. "Actually, Bill, there's been a change of plans." "What kind of change?" I looked out at the river where barges carried timber and grain toward the Pacific. "Proceed as scheduled, but I need you to do something for me first." An hour later, I was driving home to the house on Elmwood Drive where I'd grown up. 2-story colonial with white siding and black shutters. A front yard that Dad obsessed over every weekend. A driveway where I'd learned to change oil and check tire pressure. The house I owned. My parents were in the kitchen when I walked in, Mom at her laptop planning what looked like a vacation, Dad reading the newspaper with his reading glasses perched on his nose. "Samantha." Mom looked up with a smile. "I'm so glad you're being mature about this. I was worried you might make it difficult." "Why would I make it difficult?" "Well, you know how you get when plans change suddenly." I didn't know how I got when plans changed suddenly, but I let it slide. "I wanted to ask about the renovation timeline," I said. "You mentioned 6 to 8 months?" "That's what the contractor estimated," Dad said without looking up from his paper. "Which contractor?" "Morrison Construction. Came highly recommended. Very professional outfit." I nodded. Bill Morrison was professional. He was also my employee. Have you finalized the plans? Mom pulled out a folder thick with design magazines and color swatches. We're thinking complete kitchen overhaul, new floors throughout, and maybe adding a master suite above the garage. I looked through their plans. They were almost identical to the renovation I designed for them, except smaller in scope and with cheaper materials. This looks expensive, I said. It is expensive, Mom admitted. But we've been saving for years, and with your father's pension and my social security, we can afford it. How much? The estimate was $85,000. I kept my expression neutral. The actual cost of their planned renovation would be closer to $150,000, but Morrison Construction was giving them the family discount, meaning they were billing me directly for the difference. That seems reasonable, I said. We thought so. And honestly, Samantha, it's time. This house has felt like a museum for the past 2 years. We need to make it ours again. I understand. That evening I packed. Not everything, just enough clothes and personal items to make it look like I was moving out. My real office equipment, my important documents, my actual valuables had never been in this house anyway. As I was loading boxes into my car, my phone rang. Miss Davis? This is Bill Morrison. We're scheduled to start demo on the Davis house Monday morning, but I wanted to confirm the timeline with you directly. I could see Mom watching from the kitchen window, probably satisfied that her irresponsible daughter was finally taking responsibility for her own life. Bill, I need you to make some changes to the project. What kind of changes? Complete the renovation as designed, but I want you to add something. A separate apartment in the basement. Full kitchen, bedroom, bathroom. Something suitable for long-term occupancy. That's a significant addition to the scope. I know. Also, I want you to install a security system. Cameras, electronic locks, the works. Miss Davis, are you sure? This is going to add another $50,000 to the project. I'm sure. Bill. I want the work completed in 4 months, not 6. That's going to require overtime crews. Then hire overtime crews. After I hung up, I stood in the driveway looking at the house where I'd grown up. Tomorrow my parents would think they were starting a modest renovation that would take 8 months and cost $85,000. In reality, they were about to get a $250,000 complete home makeover, finished in 16 weeks, with a bonus apartment they didn't know they were getting. Friday evening, Mom called me at the hotel where I was staying. Samantha, the contractor, came by today for the final walkthrough. Very impressive young man. He said they'll start Monday morning and have everything finished by August. That's good news. He also mentioned something about permits. Apparently, all the paperwork was filed weeks ago. I don't remember applying for permits. I smiled. Maybe Dad handled it. Maybe. Anyway, we're driving up to Jennifer's cabin in Washington for the weekend. We want to be out of the house when the demolition starts. Smart thinking. I have to say I'm excited. This is the first major renovation we've done since we bought the house 30 years ago. It'll be beautiful when it's finished. I hope so. The contractor mentioned they're planning some upgrades to our original plans. Better materials, additional features. I told him we didn't budget for upgrades. What did he say? He said not to worry about it. That the upgrades were being covered by, let me think, some kind of contractor incentive program. I almost laughed. Contractor incentive program. That sounds generous. I thought so too. Anyway, I should let you go. I know you're probably busy apartment hunting. Actually, Mom, I wanted to talk to you about that. About apartment hunting? About my living situation in general. Samantha, we've been through this. You need to find your own place. I agree. But I was thinking, what if my own place was closer to you and Dad? What if I could help with the renovation, make sure everything goes smoothly? Honey, you don't know anything about construction. If only she knew. I could learn. I could be your liaison with the contractor, handle the day-to-day issues so you and Dad don't have to deal with the stress. That's sweet but unnecessary. Mr. Morrison seems very capable. I'm sure he is. But wouldn't it be nice to have family involved? Someone looking out for your interests. Mom was quiet for a moment. What are you thinking? I'm thinking I could rent a place nearby. Check on the progress regularly. Make sure you're getting quality work. You do that. Of course. You're my parents. Well, if you find something in the neighborhood, that would be nice. But nothing too expensive, Samantha. You need to be realistic about your budget. Monday morning, I parked across the street from my parents' house and watched Morrison Construction arrive. 3 trucks, 8 workers, equipment for a major renovation. My parents were still at Jennifer's cabin, planning to stay away for the first week of noisy demolition work. Bill Morrison spotted me and walked over. "Miss Davis, we're ready to start. Just want to confirm, your parents don't know you're the actual owner." "They don't know anything. They think they hired you independently, they think they're paying for a basic renovation, and they think I'm a struggling 28-year-old who needs to find her own apartment. And you want to keep it that way? For now. What about when they see the scope of work we're actually doing? Tell them it's the contractor incentive program." Bill grinned. "You're paying $250,000 to renovate your parents' house and they think you're broke. That's about the size of it. Why?" I looked at the house where I'd grown up, where I'd learned to ride a bike and do homework and dream about my future. Where my parents had raised me and loved me and somehow convinced themselves that I'd failed to launch into successful adulthood. Because I love them. And because sometimes love means letting people believe what they need to believe until they're ready for the truth. 2 weeks into the renovation, Mom called with panic in her voice. "Samantha, something's wrong with the renovation." "What kind of wrong?" "They're doing too much work. The contractor said they were going to upgrade our kitchen appliances, but they delivered professional-grade equipment that costs more than my car. They're installing hardwood floors that look like they belong in a mansion. The bathroom fixtures. Samantha, I think there's been some kind of mistake." "Did you ask Mr. Morrison about it?" "He keeps talking about the contractor incentive program, but this goes way beyond incentives. This is the kind of work you see in luxury home magazines. Maybe you're getting lucky." "Lucky?" "Samantha, I think someone's going to realize the mistake and send us a bill we can't afford." "What does Dad think?" "Your father thinks we've won the renovation lottery. He's been walking around measuring things and taking pictures to send to his brothers. But I'm worried." "Want me to talk to the contractor?" "Would you? I know you don't know much about construction, but maybe you could ask some questions. Make sure we're not going to be surprised by a huge bill." That afternoon I met Bill Morrison at the house. Mom was there too, wearing her worried expression and clutching a folder of invoices. "Mr. Morrison," I said, "my mother is concerned about the scope of work. She's worried there might be some billing mistakes." "I understand her concern," Bill replied smoothly. "But I can assure you, everything is covered under our contractor incentive program." "What exactly is this incentive program?" I asked. "Well, Ms. Davis, the younger Ms. Davis. Sometimes we get bulk discounts on high-end materials. Sometimes we have crews that need training on luxury installations. In cases like this, we can offer significant upgrades at no additional cost to the homeowner." Mom looked skeptical. "But the appliances alone must cost $30,000. "Retail, yes. But we have relationships with suppliers. What costs you $85,000 might cost us $40,000 in actual expenses." It was a beautiful lie, delivered with complete confidence. In reality, the renovation was costing me exactly what I'd budgeted, $250,000. But Mom didn't need to know that. "See, Mom," I said, "you're just getting good value for your money." "I suppose." Mom still looked uncertain. "But it feels too good to be true. Sometimes things work out better than expected," I said. "Maybe this is one of those times." A month later, the renovation was ahead of schedule and looked incredible. The kitchen was a masterpiece of granite counters and custom cabinetry. The hardwood floors were museum quality. The new master suite was spacious and elegant. And the basement apartment was nearly finished. Mom called me on a Thursday evening, excitement replacing the worry in her voice. "Samantha, you have to see what they've done to the basement. Mr. Morrison said they found some structural issues that needed to be addressed, so they ended up completely refinishing the space." "That sounds great." "It's more than great. It's a complete apartment down there. Full kitchen, bedroom, bathroom, separate entrance. He said it adds significant value to the house." "That's wonderful news. The thing is, we don't really need a basement apartment. Your father and I were thinking." "Thinking what?" "Well, the apartment is beautiful. Private but still connected to the main house. Perfect for someone who wants independence but likes being close to family." I knew where this was going, but I waited for her to say it. "We were thinking maybe you'd like to rent it. From us. Below market rate, of course, since you're family." "You want me to be your basement tenant?" "Not basement tenant. Apartment tenant. There's a difference. What kind of rent are we talking about? We were thinking $800 a month. It's got its own entrance, its own utilities. You'd have complete privacy. I pretended to consider it. $800 sounds reasonable. Really? You're interested? I'm very interested. The renovation was completed in early August, exactly on schedule. My parents moved back into a house that was essentially brand new, higher quality than anything they could have afforded on their retirement budget. I moved into the basement apartment that I'd secretly had built for myself. The irony was perfect. My parents thought they'd kicked me out and then magnanimously offered to rent me space in their upgraded home. In reality, I'd renovated their house, built myself an apartment, and was now their landlord while they thought they were mine. The rent checks I wrote them every month were deposited into an account that paid for the house's maintenance and improvements. They thought they were receiving rental income from their daughter. Actually, they were receiving an allowance from their daughter's construction company. 6 months later, Dad cornered me in the kitchen during Sunday dinner. "Samantha, I need to ask you something." "Sure, Dad." "How are you affording the apartment rent? I know what you make from your consulting work, and $800 a month should be stretching your budget pretty thin." I looked at this man who had taught me to use power tools and read blueprints, who had no idea that his daughter now employed 47 people and managed millions of dollars in construction projects. "I'm doing okay, Dad. But realistically, on your income?" "Dad, what if I told you that my consulting work was more successful than you thought?" "How much more successful?" "Significantly more successful." He studied my face. "Samantha, what exactly do you do for work?" "I manage construction projects. Large-scale commercial and residential renovations." "For who?" "For my own company." "Your own company?" I pulled out my phone and showed him the Davis Construction Management website, with my photo prominently displayed as founder and CEO. "I own a construction company, Dad. I have for 6 years." He scrolled through the website, reading about projects I'd managed, awards the company had won, testimonials from satisfied clients. "This says your company generated $12 million in revenue last year." "That's correct." "Samantha, if this is true, why are you living in our basement?" "Because you're my parents and I love you. Because when you needed help with Dad's surgery and Mom's anxiety about finances, I wanted to be close enough to help. But we thought you were struggling. We thought you needed our help. I let you think that because it was easier than explaining why a successful businesswoman was choosing to live with her parents." Dad sat down heavily at the kitchen table. "Your mother is going to have a heart attack." "Does she need to know?" "She needs to know something. She's been feeling guilty about charging you rent." "The rent's not a problem, Dad. But if you can afford to live anywhere." "I choose to live here. Is that okay?" He looked around the kitchen that had been transformed with granite counters and custom cabinets, at the house that had become more beautiful than he'd ever imagined possible. "Samantha, did you have anything to do with how well this renovation turned out?" I smiled. "What do you think?" "I think my daughter is full of surprises." "Is that a good thing or a bad thing?" "It's a good thing. A very good thing." That evening we told Mom everything. She cried when she learned that I'd paid for the renovation. She laughed when she realized I was technically her landlord. She hugged me when she understood that I'd been helping manage their finances for 2 years without them knowing. "So when you said you'd pack your stuff and find your own place," she started, "I meant I'd pack my stuff and move into the apartment I'd had built in your basement." "And the contractor incentive program?" "Was me covering the difference between what you thought you were paying and what the renovation actually cost." "How much difference?" "About $165,000. Mom sat down next to Dad. "You spent $165,000 of your own money to renovate our house." "I spent $165,000 to make sure my parents had the home they deserved." "But why the secrecy? Why not just tell us?" I looked around the kitchen where we'd shared thousands of meals, where I'd learned to cook and do homework and plan my future. "Because every time I tried to talk about my business success, you changed the subject. Because you seemed more comfortable thinking of me as struggling than successful. Because I thought maybe if I could help without you knowing it was help, everyone would be happier." "Were we really that discouraging?" Dad asked. "You weren't discouraging. You were worried. You wanted me to be stable and secure and conventional. My success didn't look like your idea of success, so it was easier for you to not see it." Mom reached across the table and took my hand. I'm sorry, sweetheart. I'm sorry we made you feel like you had to hide who you really are. You didn't make me hide anything. I chose to let you believe what you needed to believe. And now you know. And I hope that's okay. Dad stood up and walked to the window that overlooked the backyard where he taught me to throw a baseball and change a tire. Samantha, I need to apologize. For what? For not seeing you. For not asking the right questions. For not recognizing that my daughter had become exactly the kind of person I'd always hoped she'd be. What kind of person is that? Someone who builds things. Someone who solves problems. Someone who takes care of the people she loves. I hugged him then in the kitchen of the house I'd bought and renovated and chosen to live in because family matters more than independence. Love matters more than pride. And sometimes the best success is the kind that nobody sees coming. A year later, when my parents sold the house to move to a retirement community in Arizona, they insisted on giving me the proceeds from the sale. I tried to refuse, pointing out that I'd essentially bought the house myself through mortgage payments and renovations. That's exactly why you should have the money, Mom said. You've been taking care of us for years. Now it's time for us to take care of you. I used the money to start a scholarship fund for kids who wanted to learn construction trades but couldn't afford technical school. Mom and Dad insisted on being listed as co-founders. Because sometimes the best family business is the one where everyone gets to contribute, everyone gets to succeed, and love finds a way to build something better than anyone imagined possible.